Imagine this. A quiet, forgotten shoe brand gathering dust on store shelves suddenly explodes into a cultural phenomenon, worn by everyone from hipsters in downtown Manhattan to celebrities on red carpets, all without a single ad campaign or celebrity endorsement. How does something so ordinary tip into the extraordinary, spreading like wildfire through a dry forest? What invisible forces turn a whisper into a roar that echoes across society? That's the mystery we're diving into today. The secret mechanics of epidemics, not of disease, but of ideas, trends, and behaviors that reshape our world in ways we never see coming. Let's set the scene in vivid detail. It's the mid-1990s in New York City, a bustling metropolis where the grunge era is slowly giving way to fresh influences. The air is thick with the scent of street vendors' hot dogs and the hum of yellow taxis zipping through traffic. In the fashion world, trends are born in the shadowy corners of underground clubs and thrift shops. Enter Hush Puppies, those unassuming suede shoes with their crepe soles, reminiscent of a bygone era. Perhaps the kind your grandfather paired with khakis for a casual Sunday outing. The Wolverine Company, which produced them, was staring down the barrel of discontinuation. Annual sales had dwindled to a pitiful 30,000 pairs, barely enough to keep the lights on in their factories. Then, almost magically, a shift occurred. It started small, in the vibrant East Village neighborhood, where young creatives, artists, musicians, and designers were scouring bins in vintage stores for pieces that screamed authenticity amid the sea of mass-produced garb. A handful of these trendsetters latched onto Hush Puppies, not because of any marketing push, but because they evoked a nostalgic anti-establishment coolness. Picture a group of 20-somethings in ripped jeans and band tees, lacing up these shoes before heading to a dimly lit bar in Soho, where the music pulses and conversations flow like cheap wine. One spots another's footwear. "Where'd you get those?" The answer sparks curiosity. A friend borrows a pair. Another sketches a design inspired by them for a local fashion zine. Word of mouth begins its subtle dance. A bartender overhears, compliments the shoes, and mentions them to patrons. A gallery owner notices them at an opening and inquires. Soon, whispers turn to chatter. Before the year is out, Hush Puppies are spotted on runways during New York Fashion Week. Sales don't just climb. They erupt. From 30,000 pairs to a staggering 430,000 in 1995 alone, and by 1996 the numbers swell into the millions. Awards roll in, celebrities like Woody Harrelson and Madonna are photographed wearing them, and what was once a relic becomes the must-have item. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, how did this happen? Why Hush Puppies and not some other dusty brand like Earth Shoes or Clark's? What alchemy transformed obscurity into ubiquity? It's akin to observing a single snowflake triggering an avalanche on a mountain slope. Innocent at first, but unstoppable once momentum builds. The essence here is that social phenomena, be they fashion fads, viral memes on social media, groundbreaking innovations, or even dramatic reductions in urban crime, don't emerge from thin air or sheer luck. They tip. They cross an invisible threshold where gradual buildup gives way to explosive change. To unravel this, we must explore three interlocking principles. The special individuals who propel the spread, the inherent qualities that make an idea memorable, and the surrounding circumstances that either fan the flames or snuff them out. We'll weave through these like a detective following clues, starting with the human catalysts at the heart of every epidemic. Consider the folks in your own circle who seem to have an endless Rolodex of contacts. The ones who can introduce you to a plumber, a venture capitalist, or a celebrity chef with equal ease. These are the connectors, the human hubs who link disparate social worlds with effortless grace. To illustrate, let's travel back to the night of April 18, 1775 in colonial America, amid the tension of impending revolution. Paul Revere, a silversmith by trade, gallops through the darkness on horseback, his cry of "The British are coming!" rousing militias from Lexington to Concord. History remembers his ride as legendary, but few know that another man, William Dawes, set out on a parallel path with the identical urgent message. Dawes rode south, Revere north, yet only Revere's alarm sparked widespread action. Villages armed themselves, bells rang out, and the Minutemen mobilized. Why the disparity? Revere wasn't just a messenger. He was a connector extraordinaire. His life intertwined with Boston's diverse strata. He knew innkeepers who gossiped with travelers, church leaders who influenced congregations, merchants trading across towns, and even Freemasons whose secret networks spanned colonies. His web wasn't random. It bridged clusters, farmers to urbanites, loyalists to patriots, creating shortcuts for information to flow. Dawes, competent as he was, lacked this breadth. His ride reached fewer ears, fizzling into obscurity. Revere's connections amplified his message, turning a solitary warning into a regional uprising. Fast forward to our hyperconnected era, where connectors operate on a global scale. Think of the parlor game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, which posits that any actor can be linked to Bacon through 6 or fewer film connections. A fun nod to the small world phenomenon discovered by psychologist Stanley Milgram in the 1960s. Milgram's experiments showed letters mailed from Omaha to Boston often reached their target via just a handful of intermediaries. But connectors slash those degrees even further. A prime example is Lois Weisberg, a cultural force in Chicago during the late 20th century. Not a household name, but her orbit included jazz legends like Dizzy Gillespie, politicians such as mayors and senators, architects redesigning cityscapes, writers penning bestsellers, and even everyday folks like parking attendants who knew the city's underbelly. Weisberg's magic lay in her innate ability to spot synergies. When she championed a public art initiative, say a mural project in a neglected park, she'd link starving artists with grant-wielding bureaucrats, community leaders with corporate sponsors. The idea didn't stall in one silo. It jumped fences, gaining momentum until it transformed urban landscapes. Without such connectors, innovations languish in isolation, echoing only within narrow chambers. But introduce one, and a casual coffee chat can snowball into a cultural shift, a business empire, or a social reform. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone whose introductions feel like doors unlocking to new realms? They're the unsung architects of change. Of course, even the best connectors need substance to share raw, reliable intel that sparks interest. Enter the mavens, those passionate accumulators of knowledge who burrow into details like archaeologists unearthing treasures, then generously dispense their findings. They're not motivated by fame or fortune. Their joy comes from enlightening others, from being the go-to expert whose advice saves time, money, or hassle. Picture this scenario. You're in the market for a new smartphone, overwhelmed by specs, reviews, and hype. Who do you text? That buddy who's devoured every tech blog, compared battery life across models, and even haggled with carriers for hidden deals. That's your maven, the one who tips the scales in consumer markets by identifying overlooked gems. A classic tale of maven power unfolds in the telecommunications upheaval of the 1990s, when long-distance calling rates plummeted from exorbitant highs to affordable lows. This wasn't the result of benevolent telecom giants. It stemmed from grassroots pressure driven by mavens like Tom Gao, an unassuming financial advisor from Torrance, California. Gao had no stake in the phone industry, but he developed an obsession with billing plans, poring over fine print, calculating per-minute costs, and negotiating fiercely with operators like AT&T and MCI. He'd secure rock-bottom rates for himself, then evangelize to his clients, friends, and family. Switch to this plan. Here's why it's better. His zeal was contagious. Recipients not only adopted his tips, but began demanding similar deals, creating a ripple effect that forced companies to compete aggressively. Within months, what started as personal savings snowballed into industry-wide price wars, with rates dropping by as much as 50% nationwide. Mavens like Gao aren't flashy advertisers. They're credible sources whose endorsements carry authenticity because they're rooted in exhaustive research. They're the reason why an obscure restaurant becomes a hotspot after a food critic's rave, or why a budget gadget outsells premium rivals once word spreads of its superior value. Without mavens, trends might never gain the factual backbone needed to convince skeptics. Rounding out this trio are the salesmen, the magnetic personalities who don't just inform but enchant, persuading with a blend of charisma, empathy, and subtle cues that make resistance futile. They're not the stereotypical pushy hawkers. Rather, they're masters of emotional synchronization, reading micro-expressions and adapting in real time to build rapport. Ever found yourself glued to an infomercial at 2 a.m., convinced you need that miracle mop despite your better judgment? That's salesman sorcery at work. The rhythmic patter, the enthusiastic testimonials, the way the host seems to speak directly to your needs. Scientific backing comes from studies on negotiation and persuasion, like those by psychologist Howard Friedman, who measured effective communication, the nonverbal dance of gestures, tones, and facial expressions. In one experiment, pairs negotiated deals while observers noted synchronization. Successful duos mirrored each other unconsciously, leaning forward together, matching speech rhythms, even blinking in unison. This motor mimicry fosters trust, making ideas more palatable. Think of iconic salesmen like Billy Mays, the booming voice behind OxyClean, who turned a humble laundry additive into a multimillion-dollar phenomenon through sheer on-screen energy, or Oprah Winfrey, whose book club endorsements could catapult obscure titles to bestseller status by framing them with personal, relatable passion. These salesmen excel at closing the gap between curiosity and commitment, transforming maybe into yes. In tandem, connectors, mavens, and salesmen embody the law of the few. A select cadre, often just 10 to 20% of a population, drives 80% of the influence, much like the Pareto principle in economics. It's why a cluster of East Village hipsters could resurrect hush puppies without a dime spent on ads. But even with these dynamos, an idea must cling to the mind like burrs on a hiker's sock. If it slips away forgotten, no amount of networking matters. So, let's delve into the stickiness factor, the art of crafting messages that endure amid the noise of daily life. Transport yourself to the vibrant studios of Children's Television Workshop in 1968, where a visionary team led by Joan Gans Cooney aimed to harness television's power for education, targeting underserved inner-city children who lagged in literacy and numeracy. Sesame Street was born, a groundbreaking show blending live actors, animated segments, and lovable Muppets like Big Bird and Cookie Monster in a fast-paced, song-filled format. Yet initial pilots bombed in testing. Preschoolers wandered off, more interested in their toys than the screen. The problem? Lack of stickiness. The content didn't captivate enough to hold fleeting attention spans. Through trial and error, creators discovered key tweaks. Early versions segregated fantasy, Muppets, from reality, humans, but that fragmented the experience. Integrating them, having Oscar the Grouch banter with neighborhood kids, created a seamless, immersive world that felt real and enchanting. Attention soared. Kids not only watched but engaged, repeating letters and numbers aloud. Stickiness, it turns out, thrives on simplicity wrapped in surprise. Core messages distilled to essentials, delivered with repetition that's varied enough to avoid boredom. Another gem from advertising history, the Columbia House Record Club's Gold Box campaign in the 1970s and 80s. Their mailers promised cheap albums but buried the offer in dense text. To boost engagement, they hid a treasure hunt clue pointing to a golden box elsewhere in the ad, unlocking extra perks. Response rates exploded not due to bigger prizes, but because the interactive element made the pitch memorable, turning passive reading into active participation. People recalled it days later, compelled to act. Building on this, consider Blue's Clues, launched in 1996 as a preschool powerhouse that outshone even Sesame Street in retention tests. Host Steve, later Joe, didn't lecture. He posed puzzles, like finding clues to solve a mystery, then paused dramatically, as if awaiting the child's response through the TV. Episodes aired the same story Monday through Friday, with minor tweaks, exploiting kids' love for predictability and mastery. Why does this stick? Psychologists note that repetition builds neural pathways, while the pause fosters a sense of involvement, making viewers feel smart and included. It's emotional glue, the aha moment that cements learning far better than rote drills. Stickiness elevates mundane info to unforgettable lore, but even the stickiest message can falter if the soil isn't fertile. This leads us to the power of context, the notion that human behavior is profoundly malleable, molded by immediate surroundings more than inherent traits. It's why the same person might litter in a trash-strewn park but not in a pristine one. Cues dictate norms. Rewind to 1980s New York City, a concrete jungle plagued by soaring crime. Murders topped 2,000 annually, Subways were graffiti-covered dens of fear where muggings were routine. Enter a turning point under Transit Chief David Gunn and later Police Commissioner William Bratton. Instead of targeting kingpins, they embraced the broken windows theory, posited by criminologists James Q. Wilson and George Kelling. Minor disorders, left unchecked, signal neglect and invite escalation. So, teams scrubbed graffiti from trains nightly, ensuring no car rolled out marked. Fare evaders, those jumping turnstiles, were arrested en masse, often revealing weapons or warrants. Critics decried it as cosmetic, but results stunned. Subway crime dropped 75% by the mid-1990s, rippling citywide as Mayor Rudy Giuliani adopted similar zero-tolerance policies. Homicides halved. Why? Context reshaped perceptions. Clean environments conveyed control, deterring would-be offenders who sensed watchful eyes. A solitary broken window, if repaired promptly, halts decay. Ignored, it beckons vandals to shatter more. Context extends beyond bricks and mortar to social and psychological realms. Recall Philip Zimbardo's 1971 Stanford prison experiment. College students assigned as guards or prisoners in a mock jail. Within days, guards turned tyrannical, humiliating, abusing inmates, despite being everyday kids. The simulated prison context elicited behaviors alien to their normal selves. Similarly, a Princeton study had theology students prepare a talk on the Good Samaritan, then encounter a groaning man in distress en route. Those told they were late hurried past. Those with time aided him. Mere time pressure tipped altruism to indifference. Venturing further, examine Baltimore's syphilis outbreak in the mid-1990s, where cases tripled seemingly overnight. Epidemiologists hunted a superstrain, but unearthed contextual culprits. The crack epidemic altered risky behaviors in impoverished areas, fostering casual encounters. Budget cuts shuttered clinics, delaying diagnoses. Urban renewal raised housing projects, dispersing residents and intertwining infection networks. Individually minor, these shifts collectively tipped the balance, like dominoes toppling in sequence. It's a reminder: epidemics brew in cauldrons of circumstance, where small perturbations yield outsized effects. This explains the patchy spread of habits like teen smoking. Why do some adolescents succumb while siblings resist? It's seldom raw rebellion. Rather, environmental amplifiers. Glamorous movie scenes of stars puffing away. Peer gatherings where cigarettes symbolize maturity. Research from the CDC shows smokers aren't innately more defiant. They tip via cues. Alter context. Enforce ad bans, hike taxes, mandate graphic warnings, and adoption rates plunge, as evidenced by campaigns slicing U.S. youth smoking from 36% in 1997 to 6% by 2023. When the law of the few, stickiness, and context converge, magic or mayhem ensues. Revisit Airwalk sneakers' meteoric rise in the early 1990s. Born as a scrappy skateboard brand in California, Airwalk catered to niche riders with durable, grippy soles. Mavens in the skate community raved about their performance, dissecting features in zines. Connectors like trend forecaster Dee Dee Gordon bridged skaters to mainstream youth via her agency, introducing Airwalk to advertisers. Salesmen crafted campaigns with offbeat humor, Tibetan monks shredding on boards, absurd scenarios that felt authentically lame, yet cool. Stickiness stemmed from insider appeal, while grunge's rebellious context provided the perfect backdrop, propelling sales from $16 million to $175 million in years. Alas, tipping points cut both ways. As Airwalk saturated malls, early adopters fled, deeming it sellout. Sales cratered, a cautionary tale of overreach. Now, extrapolate to world-altering ideas. The hybrid car boom. Toyota's Prius tipped in the 2000s via eco-mavens touting efficiency. Celebrity connectors like Leonardo DiCaprio driving them to events, sticky marketing emphasizing green without sacrifice, and contextual oil crises heightening appeal. Or #MeToo in 2017. After simmering via isolated stories, it erupted when actresses, connectors, shared via Twitter, journalists, mavens, unearthed patterns, advocates, salesmen, framed it empathetically. The phrase Me Too stuck like Velcro, short, relatable, and social media's context amplified it virally, toppling moguls and sparking laws. Revisiting Paul Revere through 2025 lenses. In our algorithm-driven age, a connector's post can tip elections or markets. But sans stickiness, a bland meme versus a punchy one, it vanishes. Contexts like echo chamber feeds tip toward extremes, as seen in polarized debates on climate or vaccines. Pondering this, are we mere marionettes, danced by unseen strings? Or architects capable of redirection? The latter thrills. Knowledge equips us to orchestrate positive tips. Witness Micronesia's 1970s, 80s suicide epidemic among teens, spiking post a publicized case. Media sensationalism made methods sticky, connectors disseminated details, isolation context fueled despair. Interventions, counseling, reporting curbs reversed the trend, saving lives. In commerce, virality quests abound. Pokémon Go's 2016 frenzy. Tech mavens lauded augmented reality. Gaming connectors hyped via forums. Salesmen touted social fun. Stickiness. Collection compulsion, like digital stamps. Context. Ubiquitous smartphones, Pokémon nostalgia. Downloads hit 500 million, boosting exercise unwittingly. Education remains a tipping arena. Beyond Sesame, contrast reading methodologies. Whole language immerses in stories for intuition, but phonics, decoding sounds systematically, tips superior via sticky repetition. Yet crammed classrooms undermine. Enrich with interactive tales, smaller groups, and literacy surges, as in Finland's model. Health histories illuminate too. The 1980s AIDS crisis tipped via connectors like Gate and Dugas, whose jet-setting linked gay communities continent-wide. Virus stealth stuck infections undetected. Urban anonymity contextualized anonymity. Campaigns countered with sticky PSAs. AIDS. It's not just a gay disease. And contextual shifts like needle exchanges, halting spread, corporate lore. Fax machines languished pre-1980s until Maven adopters reached 5 to 10% saturation, tipping context. Suddenly, non-owners were isolated. Similar to network effects in apps like WhatsApp. These narratives interlace, revealing cascades from minutiae. Delve into why we're vulnerable. Evolutionary wiring for conformity, per Ash's 1950s lines experiments. Subjects doubted eyes when groups erred unanimously. Tipping exploits this herd instinct for unity or manipulation. Historical revivals. John Wesley's 1700s Methodism tipped amid England's industrial strife. Context. His fiery oratory stuck emotionally. Salesmen. Circuit riders connected parishes. Connectors. Doctrinal mavens refined theology. Converts numbered millions, birthing social reforms. Tech manias. 1990s .com bubble tipped on maven forecasts of internet gold. Investor connectors, new economy, sticky slogans, low-rate context. Burst ensued when reality bit. Predictability, elusive but harbingers, niche buzz escalation, prototype adhesion, contextual pivots like regulations. Vigilance yields edges. Nearing closure, one final yarn. America's smoking decline. From 42% prevalence in 1964 post-Surgeon General's report, it tipped downward via health mavens' data deluge, media connectors' broadcasts, truth campaign salesmen's visceral ads, think dying smokers' tales. Bans contextualized inconvenience. Now under 12%, yet in Asia, context sustains upticks. Ultimately, tipping points unveil our web of interdependence, where tweaks unleash tsunamis. Empowering, humbling, we navigate vast flows. Reflect. What contagion swirls around you? A minor nudge, smile at a stranger, share insight, tweak habit, might tip positivity. In few, sticky context lies potency. Wield it. Ignite your revolution. Thanks for this odyssey. Now tip boldly.